All right, let's get designing on the homepage for this e-commerce site. The site we're going to be tackling in this course is for a furniture brand called Fernie. And the first step is to kind of outline the general layout of our homepage. And we're going to do that using frames. Now, I want to pause here for a second because if you're brand new to Figma, you might be used to using rectangles versus frames. And frames in Figma are a lot more powerful than rectangles. So I'm going to encourage you throughout this course to use frames for almost everything. You can give frames fills, different styles, and most importantly, they're critical when it comes to auto layout, which again, we'll tackle later in the course. Okay, we're going to start with the header. So first, I'm just going to take the frame for our homepage and just extend it a bit because we know we're going to need more space. So for the header, I'm going to go up and I'm going to grab, like I said, another frame. And so that we can see what we're working with for this frame, even though it's really just like a placeholder or like a skeleton that we're building, I still want to give it a fill. So we're just going to use this gray color. And for the header, we're going to have kind of like an image with some text overlay. And at the top, we'll also have a nav bar. So we want to make this frame full width. And then I think I'm going to make it 776 pixels high. And this is usually just a good rule of thumb for a header. You don't have to use this exactly, but this is kind of like a sweet spot that I like for desktop. Next, we're going to do a product row here, just like a preview row of products on the homepage. Maybe like it's the most popular products or featured products or something like that. And so in order to do that, I'm just going to duplicate this frame here. And the way that I'm duplicating like this is I'm just dragging while I'm holding Option. And if you drag while you hold Option and Shift, then it will actually drag right in line with the other frame. So that's all I'm doing for this. And so in order to create sort of this skeleton for a 3-up product grid, I want to make sure I know exactly how big each one needs to be so that we can maintain consistent spacing and margins and size. So to do that, I'm actually going to use kind of like math equations within Figma. So for example, we have this so far, and I think our products will probably be a little bit less tall, a little bit shorter. So maybe we'll go with 500 for now. But the width is the tricky part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be selected on this frame and I'm going to go up to width and I'm going to make my cursor after 440 and I'm going to subtract the spacing that I want. So let's say I want 80 pixels of space on either side. I'm going to subtract 160. And then let's say I also want 80 pixels of space in between each product. So if we have 3 products, then we have 2 sort of negative spaces in between. So I'm going to do minus 160 again. And then I'm going to divide by 3 because we have 3 products. Okay, we were given a decimal here, so I'm just going to round this to 373. I personally just don't like working with decimals, but whatever works for you. So then we have this one component. So this is the size that we want to use. I'm just going to center it. And I think maybe we could always change this later, but 120 pixels of space between these looks good. Then, like I said, we're going to have 80 pixels of space between these two. So I'm just doing that duplication trick that I showed you before. And there we go. Now we have a nice sort of wireframe for this grid. And when we go to create these components, we know exactly what size they need to be. Next, I'm just going to block out a spot for like a full width image with maybe like some text on top. So I'm just going to duplicate this again and we'll make it white so that we can actually see it. Maybe it looks something like that. So we'll just have an image with a text box over it, and I think that will be pretty good. And after that, we're going to have our footer. So just going to duplicate this once again. And in order to maintain consistency, I'm going to do 120 pixels here. And then for this footer, we don't know the exact height it needs to be yet because we don't have any content in there, but this should be good for now. And here we go. Here is our wireframe using frames. And so this is helpful because we can actually go in a future lesson and use these frames, change the fill, change the style, add elements inside of them, and really create our visual design based on this. And I want to show you what I mean by that before we move forward. So let's just say that we want for this section not to be full width, but we actually want it to be a shape. So let's say we want it to look like this, and we want it to have rounded corners. So I can take this frame, even though it's not a rectangle, it's not a shape, I can still manipulate things about it. So I'm going to come up here to the corner radius, and I'm just going to make that 20. So we can see what that looks like. It's a very subtle corner radius. I think I actually want it to be a little bit more obvious, like 60. That looks pretty good. And then we can also do the same with this text box. So probably look good at 40. Kind of looks like it's nicely nested in there. So that should be good. And then we can just sort of keep playing around with our spacing here. Okay, cool. Looking good. And this whole frame thing works for things other than large sections like this. It also works for things like buttons. So we will be creating buttons in a future lesson, but I just want to show you kind of the power of frames here. So I'm just going to select on frame, and just off to the side, we're going to create a button. So I just have a frame. I'm hitting T for text, and I'm going to do button. I like for my button text to be around 16 pixels, which means that this frame is much too big. So I'm just going to change that. Okay. That's fine for now. Let's say we want to make this button blue. And we want the text to be white. Use black. So I'm just going to center this within here, and I'm going to select on the frame. I like to name my frames just to stay organized. And we can give this a nice corner radius so that it looks like a pill button. So as you can see, this frame, it's not just a shape that is independent from, everything else. It's actually housing this text. The text is staying centered in the middle as I'm moving this around. And so that is kind of the power of frames at its very basic level. We're going to use frames for just about everything in this design. So you might be wondering, when will we use shapes? So one reason you might use a shape is to use a line. We're probably going to be using some lines within our designs here and there. You also might want to create like a little bit of a fancier shape. So let's use the star tool, and I'm just going to create this star here, make it red. And then if I select on it, you can actually make it into a bunch of different things. So what if we wanted it to look a bit like a badge? So maybe we want it to have like 40 sides, and instead of having these like really harsh sort of spikes, maybe we sort of bring these out so that they're just a little bit smaller, I guess. And then we can even round those so that it looks more like this. This kind of looks like a Ritz cracker, but we might actually be able to use this shape somewhere as like a badge on a product image or something. So we'll save this for later and come back to it. All right, now that we have this basic layout, in the next lesson, we are going to start adding images, which is kind of the first step to really bringing our homepage to life.